and Putinism if we understand the code or mentality of Putin and his close associates. To continue the biological analogy, the code of Putinism is the nervous system. It is the coordinating center, the brain, and the depository not just of reason, but also of emotions, habits, and ideas. The nervous system controls the rest of the body. The code of Putinism has guided the political decisions that have shaped the political and economic system, domestic and foreign policy. The code of Putinism is not simply the worldview of leading Russian elites, but also a set of habits and emotions that guide policy and decision-making. The dominant beliefs of the current regime are basically conservative and stress the need for a strong state to protect Russia against internal and external enemies. This core idea is reinforced by habits of control, order, and loyalty acquired in the Soviet state, especially its security organs, and emotions related to loss of status, resentment, the desire for respect, and vulnerability. The notion of a code, therefore, is meant to highlight that Putin, like all people, is motivated not simply by rational self-interest, but also by ideas, habits, and emotions. This combination of emotion, habit, and ideas is what I call a code or mentality. It is the code of Putinism, and not the code of Putin, because it reflects the mentality of not just Putin, but also many of his closest and most influential associates, people who have worked with Putin for decades. There is a Team Putin with a distinct and coherent mentality. There are three major implications of the core argument about the existence and importance of the code of Putinism, and these implications distinguish my argument from some important alternatives to understanding Russian politics. First, Putin matters. Second, what matters about Putin and his team is the code. Third, the code of Putinism has made Russia an underperforming country at the domestic level and an overambitious one at the international level. There are important and influential alternatives to each of these three arguments. Although everyone would agree, one would think, that Putin matters, many would argue that what he believes and feels is relatively unimportant because he is tightly constrained by what we might call pre-existing conditions: Russian culture, dependence on oil and gas, the legacies of communism, and so on. I contend that, although these conditions obviously matter, Putin was able to make consequential decisions that greatly shaped Russia's trajectory. Second, he made these important choices under the influence of the code, the ideas and habits and emotions that are shared by Putin and much of his circle. Although Putin and his allies are obviously somewhat constrained by circumstances and have their own interests to pursue, including power and wealth, their behavior cannot be understood solely or even primarily as motivated by narrow calculations of personal gain. Rather, rational interests combine with elements of the code. For example, Putin is often portrayed as a cold-blooded schemer. One of his closest friends, however, once described him as a very emotional person, but he was completely incapable of expressing emotion. He had strong emotions, but he couldn't present them properly. This friend was the cellist Sergei Roldugin, who was later revealed to have secret foreign bank accounts showing that he was a billionaire, riches seemingly acquired through insider deals involving companies controlled either by the Russian state or other friends of Putin. What should we conclude from this? The obvious story is that Putin is enriching his old friends, and perhaps himself. Some have speculated that Roldugin's wealth is actually Putin's. But if we have a broader view of what motivates people, we also see that Putin has remained steadfastly loyal to an old friend whom he could have left behind in his ascent to power, and that one of his closest friends knows Putin to be a very emotional person. Roldugin stated that over time, Putin learned to express his emotions well, and I have to agree. Putin's emotions come out clearly in many speeches and interviews. Throughout the book, we will see how a mix of habits, ideas, emotions, and yes, interests influence the actions of Putin and his circle. Within a highly centralized and personalistic political system,